So where are we again with the Iran-US deal? We keep on hearing the deal is imminent. It's going to happen any day now, and any day, every day that passes, we hear there's just one sticking point left to iron out. It's just the wording that's left, and yet there is no deal still to be signed. What we hear on the news is that there's only one obstacle to the Iran-US deal right now, but in reality, there's actually another obstacle that's stopping the US moving forward with this. If you look at the news, the last sticking point is that how much of Iran's frozen assets will be unfrozen. We hear the US is saying maximum $12 billion, and Iran is wanting $24 billion. The total of that frozen assets by the US is around $100 billion plus. So we're looking at either 12% or 24%. The US is saying we're going to unfreeze that as the negotiation progresses, as we enter into the agreement, and Iran meets the conditions that the US has set. But Iran is saying we don't want this as soon as we sign this agreement because we don't trust you, the US. We've seen this before. We entered into the JCPOA. You said you're going to unsanction everything and unfreeze all the assets, yet that didn't happen. And so for the Iranians, they have the memory of being lied to by the US. And so they want this up front. The other sticking points that got resolved was the enriched uranium. It seems like Trump, he came on Truth Social and said that, we prefer that the enriched uranium leaves and is given to us, the US, but we don't mind if this was done, if it's down blended, the highly enriched uranium of 60% is down blended at some other location where there are inspectors confirming and verifying that it has been down blended to the from 60% to 3.56%. And then the other point was the Strait of Hormuz. The US said that there shouldn't be any toll fee, but now it seems like they've agreed that there's going to be a environmental fee. So that's basically a toll fee, but it might not be as high as $1 per barrel. It might be much less than that. But it seems like the US has conceded to give Iran some control over the Strait of Hormuz. That's a lot of concessions by the US. And so the last sticking point apparently is this unfreezing of assets. How much can they unfreeze and when will this be unlocked? That's what you hear in the news. But the reality is that the reason why this is not moving forward is because every time Trump agrees to something, he goes back, speaks to Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, speaks to the pro-war cabinet and the people that he surrounds himself with, and they tell him this is a worse deal than the Obama deal, the JCPOA, which he makes fun of all the time. And they're going to tell him, Mr. President, do you want to be known as the person that made a deal with Iran that's worse than the Obama deal, which is, to them, the worst deal in the world, when in reality, it was a terrible deal for Iran. They've had to meet very stringent conditions regarding their nuclear activities. And in return, they didn't get that much. They had some of their industries unsanctioned. Their money was not unfrozen. And a lot of their other industries was not unsanctioned. And at the end of the day, Trump came in and just ripped that agreement apart after only 2 years. And so the JCPOA was a terrible deal for Iran. But in Trump's circle, it was a terrible deal for the US. And so they want to get a better deal than the Obama deal, which is insane because you can't get a better deal after initiating a war while negotiating with the Iranians. And the Iranians now have more leverage than before because they have control of the Strait of Hormuz, which is something they didn't control before the war. So of course, you're going to get a worse deal from an American perspective than the Obama JCPOA deal. So the sticking point is that, and this is the problem with Trump, is his ego. He has surrounded himself with people that tell him what he wants to hear. So he's fired and removed most of the people that will challenge him. And he's surrounded himself with people that tell him what he wants to hear. And those people are the same people that are pro-war. So now he's surrounding himself with people that are just telling him this is a bad deal. Those are the people that have only said good things to Trump. That's why they're there and surrounded by that surround Trump. The Lindsey Grahams, the Laura Loomers, the Mark Levins. Apparently Trump watches Fox News all the time. That's most of what he gets his news from. And Fox News is very pro-Israel and very anti-Iran. So if the news that you're getting and the people that you've surrounded yourself with are all telling you that this is a bad deal, this is a worse deal than the Obama deal, and that you should go back to war and escalate and put more pressure on the Iranians, then what's Trump going to do? He's going to ignore all that if that's what he's surrounded by, even though getting into a deal with the Iranians is the best option for the U.S. Now, it's true, there's no good option for the U.S. in this situation. Because if the U.S. just does nothing, oil prices are going to go up, Iran is going to control the Strait of Hormuz, and it's going to become a regional power. If it escalates, what is the U.S. going to do that it hasn't done or hasn't been able to achieve in the 39-day war, where they used a lot of their ammunition, 10-year supply of certain ammunition, and they still weren't able to achieve their objective, which was a regime change, obtain the nuclear dust, the nuclear material, put pressure such that Iranians give more concessions than before the war, or get into a deal, which is the least worst option for the U.S. Yes, it means the U.S. has to admit defeat in essence, but I'm sure Trump can find a way to twist it and manipulate it to sell it as a win. But it's a bad deal for the U.S., but it's the best option for the U.S. compared to all the other options. All the other options are much worse. They destroy the world economy much quicker, much faster, more guaranteed. That's what escalation would do, because it would attack the infrastructure, because that's the only targets left. If if the goal is to weaken the Iranian government, then the infrastructure would be what I would expect to be the target. And that would mean retaliation from Iran on the infrastructure of the Middle East. That would destroy not just the Middle East economies, but the whole world economies, because there's not going to be much oil left coming out from that region. But it's a struggle for Trump to accept a bad deal. But that's the only deal available. Now, how could certain people stop this Iran deal from going forward? And I'm looking at Israel here. How can Israel stop the Iran deal with the U.S. from going forward? Because they really don't want this deal. Their objective is the destruction of Iran. Well, the way to stop it is to restart the war in Lebanon, which is exactly what they're doing right now. Iran has made it very clear that a restart of war in Lebanon would stop the negotiation. If they attack Beirut, the negotiations are on pause. This was one of the reasons why the ceasefire was a bit shaky at the beginning, because Israel wouldn't abide by the ceasefire, whereby the U.S. agreed that Israel's part of it, but then Israel is saying, no, we're not. And this is the situation that is happening. Every time Trump agrees to something, he goes back to Benjamin Netanyahu. He goes back to, the people that he surrounds himself with. And the only ones that he surrounded himself with now are pro-Israel, pro-war people. And they're telling him, we can't accept that. That is a bad deal. And so he kind of goes back on what he told the Iranians. He told them that we'll agree on this, but then he goes back on that. And he keeps on repeating the same thing. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Let's be honest. The goal isn't about Iran not having a nuclear weapon. Iran, as has been confirmed by the U.S. intelligence, all of U.S. intelligence has confirmed that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, nor do they intend to build a nuclear weapon. They could if they wanted to. They have the capability and the skills and the right allies, such as Russia, North Korea, China, to help them, but they're not building a nuclear weapon. You see, if the goal was actually to limit the nuclear potential of Iran, then that's what the JCPOA deal was about, is to limit that capability. If the goal was to really limit, if the worry was about Iran's nuclear capability, they would have accepted the terms, the concessions that the Iranians gave before this Iran-US war, Israel war, in which Iran said they will stop enrichment, zero enrichment for 15 years, which was longer than the Obama deal. That was the deal. That was better than the Obama deal. Trump could have just taken that and showed it to people and said, I got a better deal than the Obama deal. But the objective wasn't the nuclear limitations. It was to weaken Iran, because that's Israel's objective. Israel sees its biggest threat at the moment is Iran. Next comes Turkey, and after that is Pakistan, as they have said it themselves. And it didn't care whether there's a civil war where millions would have been killed, as long as the objective of a weakened Iran is achieved by any means, whereby it could carry it out and still get the diplomatic support from Western powers, i.e. without using nuclear weapons. That is the goal. And so the Israelis are going to try their best to sabotage this. One, through restarting the war in Lebanon. Two, by ensuring that all the people around Trump who are pro-Israel, individuals speak to his ear to tell him how bad this is how bad this deal is, how he'll be remembered as the person that made the worst deal with the Iranians. And so it's going to be a struggle for Trump to really move that forward. It's not impossible. It still could happen because there is no other option. The other option is escalation, which would mean the destruction of the whole Middle East and the world economy. That's a much worse deal than an actual deal with Iran. Or just to leave things as they are right now and just for the US to walk away. But again, that means Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz and oil prices will keep on being elevated, and Iran controls basically the supply of oil that's coming out of the Middle East. And the US's image is demolished, destroyed. Who would benefit the most from an escalation? Who would benefit the most from Trump escalating and restarting the war with Iran? It's Israel, because restarting the war with Iran would mean attacking the infrastructure of Iran, which would mean retaliation by Iran on the infrastructure of the whole region that, in its view, has facilitated and helped the US and Israel carry out those attacks on Iran, whether it's using their airspace or actually using their land in some instances. This would mean a much weakened Iran, of course, but also a Middle East, whereby they have to spend years and maybe even decades repairing their infrastructure. Who would be the regional power? It would be Israel. Israel would be the regional power. Who would be the worst? Who would be the biggest loser if the US gets into a deal with Iran? It would be Israel, because that would result in Iran stepping up as a regional power now, whereby before the war it was isolated, and now everyone wants to negotiate and enter into conversations with Iran to allow their ships to transit the Strait of Hormuz, which it controls. But in both cases, whether the US escalates or whether the US gets into a deal with Iran, the US is a loser of the situation, because the Middle East is not going to rely on the US anymore. It has been proven now that the US has used the Middle Eastern countries to defend Israel and attempt to achieve Israel's objectives of destroying Iran. This is why we're hearing about this new defense architecture between the Middle Eastern countries, whereby Pakistan is now into a defense pact with Saudi Arabia, which was there before the war, but it's now trying to include Turkey in this and Egypt, who have big militaries in the Middle East with support from Russia coming in, to say basically that the defense of this region has to be done and carried out and supported by people of the region, being Turkey, being Egypt, being Pakistan. And we have to involve Iran in this to enter into a non-aggression pact where we agree to improve ties, economic ties, such that we don't want a war to destroy our economies. Doesn't mean we enter into a defense pact with Iran, but we enter into some kind of pact that allows us to avoid conflict in the future. Now, there are talks that Pakistan is going to give its nuclear umbrella to Saudi Arabia. That means basically that a nuclear attack on Saudi Arabia will, in part of that pact, mean a nuclear attack on Pakistan, and so Pakistan will respond with nuclear. And that's a big development. And so the biggest loser of this, of course, is the US, because the US was previously the defender of the Middle East, and that's why we had the US bases in the Middle East to provide that protection, which turned out to be all hot air, because they couldn't even defend their own US bases, let alone the Middle Eastern countries. But their focus was on Israel. And there was a Washington Post article noting how much America has used more of its defense missiles protecting Israel than Israel has used its own defense missiles to protect its own country. That's insane. No country has that kind of relationship with the US, where the US would spend more of its defense missile in protection of another country than that country has used to protect its own country. That relationship is, I think more people are becoming aware of how toxic and ludicrous that relationship is. So will the US and Iran enter into a deal? It's more likely than not that they will enter into a deal, because it doesn't make any sense to restart the war. If you're a logical person, if the president was a logical person, there's no benefit objective from restarting the war, unless your objective is to destroy the Middle East. Then the restarting the war would be the way to do it. So it's more likely that Trump, it's very obvious that Trump wants to get out of this mess. And the best way to get out of this mess is to get into the deal with Iran. But Iran has more leverage than ever before. And so it's always going to be considered a bad deal relative to, for example, the Obama deal, because Iran has more leverage. You've given it more leverage because of this war. And you have to accept that. It's just about whether Trump's ego is going to accept that. And the fact that Trump has surrounded himself with pro-war, pro-Israel people. That's all he has around him. So will he take that final step and sign that paper? And will he actually meet those terms on that paper is another question by itself. If you did like this video, do hit the like and subscribe. And would love to know your thoughts about whether a deal is the way we're going to go or restarting the war is the way it's going to happen. Thank you very much.